We meet on various territories. Some of us on the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish peoples who've lived and loved and cared for this land for millennia. I'm Reverend Meg Roberts, and I have the good fortune of being the minister here with the Beacon Unitarian Church. For anyone who is a guest or a newcomer, we offer you a special welcome. You'll find out more about us at our website. If you haven't seen it yet, it's beaconunitarian.org. And we have a form on the homepage that is, we call the Beacon Connecting Form. And if you fill that out, then you can let us know if there's other information you would like or people you would like to connect to. And then we can, in this time of virtual church, that this is a way for us to make more connections with you and help engage you into the community. We also have a coffee hour after our service. We take a little bit of a break, and then we have small group conversation, again, as a way to get to know one another better. I'm gonna ask Suze to just drop into the chat the order of service link for anybody who likes to follow along. You're not required, you don't need to. I'll talk you through things, but for those who like to visually see it, you can bring that up. And also we have a feature if you want to be able to chat at certain points in the service. If you're on a computer, it's in the bottom of your Zoom window that you'll see the icon for chat, and you can click on it, and then where it says at the bottom under blue, this little blue thing that says everyone, there's a line there. You can just click on it and type something in, and then make sure you hit enter, and then it'll enter into the chat. So I'm going to, as Heather brings up a slide, we have some opening words that I am going to invite, if you're willing, while muted, to join me in saying them in unison. These words were written by J. Abernathy, who was minister at the First Unitarian Church of Hamilton from 1976 to 78. So let's read these in unison together. We affirm that love is our greatest purpose. Accepting one another is the truest form of faithful living. The search for truth is our constant star. We pledge our hearts, minds, and hands to challenge injustice with courage, to find hope in times of fear, and to live out our Unitarian Universalist values every day as a beloved community. Thus do we covenant with each other and with all that is sacred in life. I'm going to invite anyone who would like to light their chalice to join me in doing that while Heather brings up our next slide. As Sue will lead us in a congregational chalice lighting song, Rise Up, O Flame.
Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy. Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy.
Thanks, Sue. This morning, I want to also offer a special welcome to our families. For anyone who is new here in a family, we have in our regular in-person service the time when we have a story for all ages, and then the kids go with our Director of Religious Exploration, Ashley Cole, down to do special programming. During this virtual time, so that we can keep each other safe during the pandemic, what we've done is we've adapted that programming so that Ashley is sending packages, monthly program packages that connect to our monthly exploration of a principle that we hold as Unitarian Universalists. And so if you would like to connect with Ashley, Suze is going to put into the chat Ashley's contact email, and please contact her, let her know a bit about you and what you're looking for, and then she can answer any questions as well as add you to the list of these, doing the old-fashioned mail out of packages as well as connecting online. Suze will also drop in to the chat a link to a coloring page. So for anyone, for all ages who like to be able to color as a way of also helping you to focus on what you're listening to, or just as a way for the enjoyment of creative expression. Pardon me. For our story for all ages, it is A Tale of Three Villages by Renee Rachotsky. Thanks to my readers, Heather, Sue, and Susan, who will unmute. There once were three villagers whose village was flooded. Together, they set out for higher ground to find a new home. As they journeyed, they reminisced in stories of their former home and the loved ones that they had lost in the flood. As they crossed over mountains, they saw a sheltered, fertile valley below with a cluster of three small villages. One said,
"Well, this land looks a lot like home, but I feel a bit nervous about meeting new people."
The second said,
We have become good friends. We know and trust each other, and we share tasks fairly.
The third said,
Let's ask good questions at each village to help us find a new home.
Over their fire that night, they came up with two questions.
How does the village make decisions?
What happens when you don't agree?
When they entered the first village, the villagers told them, well, we have a powerful ruler who decides what's best for our village. The ruler's family has been in charge for many generations. If we have a disagreement, the ruler decides for us. The travelers looked at each other with tight lips, then thanked the villagers and continued their journey. When they entered the second village, they asked,
How does your village make decisions?
The villagers responded, we vote for a few people to represent all of us on a council. We vote for people who promise to make decisions that are best for us. Then the travelers asked,
What happens when you don't agree with what the council decides?
The villagers said, well, sometimes we don't all like what they decide, but we have to do it. The travelers looked at each other with disappointment in their eyes, then said to those villagers as well,
Thank you.
Goodbye.
As they trudged to the third village, they talked amongst themselves.
Well, that sounded good at first, but was it better than the village with a ruler?
Not really. Some people have a bigger say.
After the others vote for them, the people on the council can do whatever they want.
In the third village, they soon found some villagers to ask about decision-making there. One villager smiled and said, come, we will show you. The villagers formed a large circle and invited the travelers to join them. A villager wearing a special necklace said, we welcome you into our circle. If you would like to stay, you must accept our agreements, speak the truth, keep your promises, honor and care for this circle as part of earth and sky. Travelers looked at each other with shiny eyes, and they agreed in unison. Another villager explained, this is how we make important decisions, by listening to each other in turn, under these agreements, until the decision is made. This is also how we disagree, by listening to each other in turn. Sometimes we agree to disagree, but we disagree in respect and peace. The travelers smiled wide. They had found their home. Thanks to my readers and to the Unitarian Universalist Association, their family pages for this fall, their special edition called Keeping the Covenant of Democracy. I'm going to invite Ming Shun to introduce a piece of music that he's going to play and sing for us.
Hi everyone, I'll be singing this piece called Del Cabello Más Sutil by Fernando Obradors. And I'm just going to read the translated lyrics in English. It's, from your delicate hair that you have in your braid, I want to make a chain in order to bring you to my side. A picture in your house, little girl, I would like to be so that I can kiss you on the mouth whenever you take a drink.
How beautiful. Thanks, Ming Shun. I want to share this reflection on what can democracy look like. When the head of state of one of the most powerful countries in the world on earth declares publicly that the election is a fraud and produces no evidence, that is a comment on the nature of democracy today. Susan Terra sent me a link yesterday to a New Yorker article looking at how a democracy can become an autocracy. Masha Gessen wrote just on November the 5th, Trump has preemptively declared the election rigged, has incited voter intimidation and encouraged voter suppression, has mobilized his armed supporters to prevent votes from being counted, and has explicitly stated that he's changing the rules of the election. He said on the Wednesday morning, we want all voting to stop, and vowed to take his case to the Supreme Court. About voter suppression, in Georgia, officials in Jefferson County last week ordered a group of African American senior citizens off a bus that was taking them to an early voting site, on the grounds that the transportation, which had been organized by the nonpartisan group Black Voters Matter, was a political activity. But this is nothing compared with the changes in voter access laws in the last couple of years across the states in ways that heavily impacted thousands of Indigenous, Black, and people of color's ability to vote. Masha Gessen had been reading up about what's been happening in Eastern European countries like Hungary and obviously Russia, and the changes in governance and the power aligning with the head of government and a supermajority in parliament and in the judiciary. When you add to that a message of divisiveness and hate, fueled by a focus on personality alone, then democracy is further weakened. On ABC News, John Carl said, This is the beginning of the end of a presidency unlike any that we have ever seen. Donald Trump was the first person elected president who had never served a day in government, nor a day in the military. So what's going on when voters believe lies just based on the personality cult of someone with no experience? And a party that would back someone like that for their nominee in the first place for the most powerful position in the world. And it is out of our societies that come such division and mistrust. How has that arisen? Because the division that we see in the US also does exist in Canada, maybe in different ways, but the division is getting wider and wider and more filled with distrust and enmity. We have seen how democracy is fragile. It can be broken in ways that take years to recover. But what else have we got? On November 11th, 73 years ago, as leader of the opposition in the United Kingdom, Winston Churchill said, "Many forms of government have been tried and will be tried in this world of sin and woe. No one pretends that democracy is perfect or all-wise. Indeed, it has been said that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all those other forms that have been tried from time to time." So democracy, the rule by the people. Now, direct democracy is when people are the ones who are doing the governing. Once you get to a larger number of people, it's usually done by representation of some kind. So in the history of democracy, Sumerian city-states are believed to have had some form of democratic setup that involved free male, like non-slave citizens. That was in Mesopotamia 6,000 years ago. Over 2,500 years ago, ancient India was the world's first republic. Shortly around that same time, ancient Greece had recorded democracies in Athens, but again, only free male Athenian citizens could be called on to serve. So we're talking rule by the people, meaning by free male people. There are, of course, the representative democracies like in the US, who has a republic, where citizens elect representatives who govern according to the law, at least in theory. And yet we have seen in these last 4 years just how much the law can be affected by who's in authority and how things are interpreted or ignored. In an oligarchy, power rests with a small, selected elite segment of society, like in South Africa in the 20th century due to systemic racism, what came to be known as apartheid, where the English and the Afrikaans-speaking whites created this oligarchy until the arrival of a democracy in 1994. That was not long ago. Now, some consider that capitalism can be seen as an oligarchy. Critics argue that in a capitalist society, power, whether economic, cultural, or political, rests in the hands of the capitalist class. That's on one side, and then also in communist states can also be seen as oligarchies ruled by a class with special privileges. So in these two ends of the spectrum, as well as all in between, it's about where power lies to make decisions and enforce them. It also depends on how citizenry engages in democracy or doesn't. The theme that we're reflecting on this month is the Unitarian Universalist principle that we affirm and promote, the right of conscience. and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. Reverend Kenneth Collier, in his book about the 7 principles, says, "The idea of self-rule is based on a religious idea. People should rule themselves because no one is privileged, in this case meaning no one is more worthy than another. This follows from what we as Unitarian Universalists take as a given, namely that each person contains inherent worth and dignity. If each person is equally worthy, then no one is more worthy than another. So it follows that each person in the community is equally responsible for the well-being of each other person. And we are all equally responsible. But if all are responsible, then all should participate in governing, and democracy is the best that we know to accomplish this." Back on October 22nd, the Unitarian Universalist Association president, Reverend Dr. Susan Frederick Gray, wrote this letter to the member congregations, to their member congregations in the U.S. As Unitarian Universalists, it's important to remember that our commitment to democracy is not just political or moral, it is fundamentally theological. It grows from our affirmation of the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and the Universalist understanding that we are all part of one creation, interconnected. These theological values of human dignity and interdependence are why we know everyone needs a voice in the matters that affect their lives. Everyone needs a voice. Kind of like our story earlier, that manifests in different ways depending on the form of governance. When the travelers entered this first village, the villagers told them of their powerful ruler who decides what's best for the village. That ruler can be in charge for many generations. If there's a disagreement, the ruler decides for them. Now, this is a form of governance that does happen in different countries and societies, and there can be checks and balances. The questions for me in any form of governance is who benefits and who loses. The second village, a small group is voted in by those villagers, and that group promise to make the decisions that are best for the community. But when the travelers asked what happens when you don't agree with what the council decides, the villagers had to say, sometimes we don't all like what they decide, but we have to do it. So some have a bigger say, and after the vote, the people on the council can then do whatever they like. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, there are times like that description sounds exactly like what goes on in both the United States and Canada. Where are the checks and balances, and how are they used? I felt proud growing up in Canada, being part of a democracy. I learned in school that we were a federal constitutional monarchy with a parliamentary democracy. Our head of state is still the Queen of Canada. When I reminded myself of that recently, I was struck by how unusual this really is. Do we ever think about that fact? What is its purpose now? I remember seeing Queen Elizabeth II's picture on the wall in our elementary school. And to me, she felt very much like a grandmother figure. It's because some of my ancestors are British. Yet she and her predecessors were not that kind of figure to those suffering under the ongoing colonization of their governments. The role of the reigning sovereign even now, is both legal and practical, but not political. She happens to also be the queen of 15 other countries as part of the Commonwealth of Nations. But who benefits from this commonwealth, both in history and still presently? I have often wondered why we continue with this arrangement with a monarch when it's largely a lot of extra formal steps, when the power actually lies in our parliamentary democracy. What would the United Kingdom do if we said we were done with it? Are we to attach to the royals with a cult of personalities? With the focus on the personality of our leaders, what has happened to knowing something about the policies that their parties stand for? I'm going to ask us all, if you're willing, when was the last time that you read the party platform of the parties during an actual election? There have been times in the last years when I have people say, well, at least I don't live in the States. I'm glad I live in Canada. And so do I, for many reasons, but I'm also not wanting to be blind to our own history of democracy. For some British colonies, when they came together as a confederation in 1867 and became the self-governing Dominion of Canada, there was democracy of a kind. But who held the vote? Male citizens, mainly European heritage. In 1872, Indigenous people and Chinese people were expressly denied the vote. In 1895, persons of Asiatic heritage were prohibited from voting in BC. Women couldn't vote until 1918. In World War II, Japanese Canadians were sent to internment camps, lost their vote as well as their property. Italian and German Canadians were considered enemy aliens by the government up until 1947. Now, sure, some things got better. Manitoba started the way in granting women the right to vote, and other provinces followed until 1918 women were granted the vote federally. I learned, however, that it wasn't until 1940 that Quebec women won the right to vote in their provincial elections. And it wasn't until 1960 that Indigenous people gained the right to vote without having to give up their treaty rights. So that was history. But who doesn't get the same access to vote now? People who are homeless, people who have to work at times when it makes it more challenging to vote. Now that we have mail-in ballots, that's certainly helped. I want to ask you to consider, how do you think we could improve our democracy? Proportional representation? Improved voter turnout? Speaking out to our politicians? A colleague said to me recently, democracy is noble, but people are not. In an Election Canada poll in 2020 about reasons for voter turnout decline, the top ones chosen were the distrust of politicians and government. There's a widespread perception that politicians are unworthy, selfish, unaccountable, lack credibility, and are not true to their word. Similarly, the governments, sometimes with a capital G government, and sometimes without, betrays the people's trust and accomplishes little. I don't know about you, but when I listen to the people speaking in the House of Commons, sometimes my skin crawls with how uncivil they are to each other. Sometimes it feels a bit like watching a kindergarten class. How do we improve the civility of how we are in government and to each other? Why have we focused so much on personality rather than character? How does the system that we have impact the lack of trust that we have with politicians and politics? We have to also look at our present form of government. We have, of course, the House of Commons, but we also have the Senate. Now, I looked at the federal government's website about the Senate, and they say, amongst various things about it, that the Senate's fundamental role is to be a complementary legislative body to the House of Commons in providing sober second thought. The Senate has also become an important institution, it says, for the representation of minority interests and groups who may be underrepresented in the elected chamber, such as Indigenous peoples, minority language and ethnic groups, and women. But what happens if that sober second thought lets a bill die that the House of Commons passed that addresses the rights of Indigenous people? And also those Indigenous people and others in the Senate who were speaking in favor of it. Now, some of you will know about Bill C-262. It was put forward by Romeo Saganash, a Cree Member of Parliament, back in 2016, to take steps towards implementing the global minimum human rights standard for Indigenous people. Yet last year, on June 21st, the National Indigenous Peoples Day, that bill died before Senate. The bill would have ensured that the laws of Canada are in harmony with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, but it didn't make it past the Senate before Parliament rose for the summer. And as the House of Commons didn't sit again before the Canadian election, the path to implementing that UN declaration in Canada is uncertain. So although the House of Commons, the elected representatives, had passed it, it still stalled. In reading some of the comments that are available on the federal government website, I was surprised at the ongoing prejudice and suspicion, the ignorance about how such things operate that affects things not only in the Senate, but in the House of Commons. What other layers of elitism are there still in our democratic processes? How do we improve them? Do we speak out to our politicians in new ways? Do we have to engage the courts? How do we advocate and put pressure on society for change? Is it engaging in grassroots movements like we've seen in the past with Idle No More, and again revived this year for many of us, Black Lives Matter, although those who've been engaged in it have been doing this work for a very long time? How do we support minority voices who continue to suffer from systemic racism and whose voices are still not being attended to? How do we not let the work that has been going on still had pressure from us to those in government to ensure that change happens? Now, we as congregations also have power in promoting democratic process. What do we do with that power? The Unitarian Universalist Association did amazing work this last year on what they called UU the Vote. There was incredible organization, congregations organized to be able to help people access getting onto the voter list, making sure that they could vote, making sure even still happening now to providing safety for those people who are still counting the ballots so that there isn't interference. I find it inspiring to read about what they're doing. What would we be ready to do then in the face of the polarization that's also happening in Canada, in the face of voter apathy? In that third village, they had the agreements to speak the truth, to keep promises, and honor and care for their circle as part of earth and sky. To agree to disagree at times, but to disagree in respect and peace. I know that when we are part of that democratic process in our congregations, that we aspire and do our best to do that. How do we then also help our children to understand what it means to be citizens and part of a democracy? How do we help them understand what it means to be in a covenantal relationship like that circle was in the third village? How do we help them see through our actions what it means to live the principles that we espouse? So what does democracy mean to you, here and now? What are the kind of changes that you think are necessary to make the ideal of democracy something closer to what actually we're living and experiencing, so that it's not just the majority who benefit, but those that have been marginalized, so that it's the rule of the people for the people? I'll end with these words, that democracy means engagement, not letting apathy dissuade us from getting involved, or becoming immobilized from feelings of overwhelm. If we want to live these principles, we can do it by supporting each other to improve how our democracy works in our congregation, as well as in society at large. As my colleague, the UUA president, says, to call us all back to the truth that we are in a generational struggle for a more just and peaceful world, and to recognize our deep commitment to organizing for the long haul, I would say, on both sides of the border. Thanks for listening. I'll invite all who would like to continue that conversation in small groups during our coffee hour on what does democracy mean for you and what are ways we can improve our democratic processes. We'll take a few moments for meditation. I'm going to ask Heather to bring up a slide. And I'd like to offer these words that were written by Andrew Hill. They're words of a prayer. For those who pray, I invite you to open yourself to these words. For those for whom prayer isn't your practice, I'll invite you to instead meditate on that great unity that is life itself and our desire for the well-being of all. Out of a troubled world of expediency and selfish strife, we come to this place set apart for the renewal of vision. Great unity beyond all differences. Should our lives be narrowed by personal sorrow or tragedy, envision us with a sense of worth. Should we be weary of the diminishing purposes of community and the persistence of global conflicts, envision us with your larger purpose. Should we feel lost upon Earth's lonely cosmic shore, envision us with joy and wonder. Uphold us when weak. Embrace us when broken. transform us when feeling partial. Great unity, bless us now in this moment of worship with that commanding vision for the well-being of all. Amen. I'm going to ask Heather to bring up the slide on sharing the plate. Every year, Beacon chooses a recipient for sharing the plate, and this year it is the New West Hospice Society that Michael was speaking of earlier. And so we encourage you to send your donations to us to be able to, for this ongoing support. And we also have from Carol a final pledge drive update.
This really is the final update from the 2021 pledge drive. But as Meg pointed out, it's important to share good news. Heather, if you show the Beacon World, we can see all the people that Nancy has put on. We've received a total of 73 pledges. That represents about 94 people connected with Beacon. And our pledge total, if you want to show the well now, Heather, is very close to 94,000. So we got close to our goal of 100,000. And I think that it's time to turn to our neighbors and say thank you for your contribution of treasure and also your contribution of time and talent, which all come together and give us our wonderful Beacon. And now Meg and Karen have some good news to share with us.
Thanks, Carol. Yes, we have an announcement about a special donation that in honor of Karen and Richard's wedding, their friends Gail Asper and Michael Patterson gave a donation of $5,000. Because of the importance of music to Richard and Karen, as well as to Beacon, a portion of this will go towards the music program, which of course includes our wonderful pianist. And a portion will go to other areas which Karen and Richard will decide in conversation with the board. I've asked Karen to let us know a bit about her friend, Gail Asper, and how she knows her.
I met Gail in 1986 in Halifax. We were both young lawyers, and she was just a very vivacious, incredible individual. And I got to know her instantly. And we've been close friends for 34 years. And she was the driving force behind the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, which her father started with her assistance, of course. And I also worked in fundraising for that museum. But the incredible announcement is Gail is on another path to and they already have the land in Tel Aviv for the World's Jewish Museum. And that museum is to celebrate contributions of the Jewish people in every conceivable field throughout history, in the arts, in science, politics. So that's a huge endeavor for her. If you look Gail Asper up in Wikipedia, I could talk for just 10 minutes just on her awards, but in 2008, she was given the Order of Canada for her work mainly on the museum, but all kinds of other things as well, and also the Order of Manitoba. I'm from Winnipeg as well, so that was why there was an instant connection too. And she also holds the Queen's Golden and Diamond Jubilee Awards. And she also, she's an actor and she's a singer. She sings opera. She played Nurse Ratched, for instance. in a play that the Canadian Bar Association in Manitoba puts on every year, and she's usually the star of Mamma Mia recently. And she holds the Mahatma Gandhi Peace Award amongst she's probably got about 40 awards here. So I just sort of handpicked something that Beacon would be meaningful. And she also has been given 6 honorary doctorates, including from Mount St. Vincent University. And that's where I taught family law and I taught the legal status of women. So I was absolutely floored with her generous donation, and I sent her she sent me an immediate letter after she saw our wedding video, and she just loved it, and she loved the inclusive spirit of Unitarianism and of Beacon. And she especially enjoyed Donna's beautiful tapestry at the Vancouver Unitarian Church. So anyway, that was from Gail and her husband from their foundation. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen, for letting us know more about your friend, and it is indeed an honoring of their relationship with both you and Richard. I also want to offer a special thank you to our Pledge Drive team, Heather Brown, Karen Hamilton, David Christensen, Nancy Rupert, and their wonderful chair, Carol Woodworth, for their wonderful dedicated work, and of course as well to all the generous donations from the Beaconites. This amount with this special donation is putting you around 99,000, which is almost at your target for 100,000. So during a time of pandemic, I think we've done wonderfully. So I hope we can all feel a celebration for that. I'm going to ask Heather to bring up a slide so that we can sing our thanks.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
Thanks, Sue, and we're going to roll forward. Thanks to everybody for taking a little extra time. We had extra joys and sorrows and milestones, which are well worth hearing. We're going to sing this song, Building a New Way, 1017. We're going to sing verses 1, 2, and 3. Sue will lead us.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with the love that is the seed. We can feed our every need.
Thanks for the jazzy tune, Sue. And we're going to thank the others as well who've helped to support today's service with the slides. We'll let you see the names. And also an invitation to join us for conversation during the coffee hour, which starts about 10 minutes for a little break. And a special thank you to all of you for sharing this experience. Here are our closing words by Krista Taves. It is our work, shared with each other in covenant, that creates and sustains this beloved community. We will extinguish this chalice, but its light lives on in the directions we've chosen, in the light of this faith, which lives on in us together, in our hearts, bodies, minds, and spirits. Amen, and blessed be. We'll now sing Carry the Flame. If you want to put your hands up to remember that wonderful feeling of joining hands, and Sue will lead us.
Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again. Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again.
Thank you, Sue. Thanks to everybody. Go well. If you can't stay for coffee hour, we hope to see you again soon.